So, um, I want you to picture a really quiet, dusty morning on the American frontier. Like the sun is just starting to heat up the wooden sidewalks. Horses are hitched to posts.
We're just a totally typical, peaceful morning.
Exactly. Folks are going about their daily business, sweeping storefronts, opening up shops. And then suddenly, that everyday tranquility is just entirely shattered by the deafening roar of lever-action rifles and shotguns.
It sounds like a movie scene.
It really does. I mean, when most of us imagine a scene like this, our brains immediately cue up a classic Hollywood Western. We picture a lone sheriff with a tin star stepping out into the middle of the dusty street for a one-on-one showdown.
Yeah, high noon style.
Right. But the reality of frontier violence was, it was often vastly different. So today we are taking a deep dive into what is basically a masterclass in civilian battlefield tactics and urban defense. We're looking at the Dalton Gang raid on Coffeyville, Kansas, which erupted on October 5th, 1892.
And to really understand how this 15-minute gun battle unfolded, we're pulling from this massive, deep research study by Mick Prichter at battlefieldtravels.com.
Which is such a fantastic resource.
It really is. I mean, the depth of this research completely changes how you view the event. Instead of just, relying on old dime novel folklore, this study relies on actual primary sources, first-hand exploration of the battlefield itself, and GIS terrain analysis.
Right, Geographic Information System.
Exactly. And applying GIS to a 19th century shootout, it just strips away all the myth. You stop looking at the legend, you start looking at hard tactical realities like lines of sight, fields of fire, and the fatal consequences of spatial relationships in an urban environment.
So before we map out the actual battle, we probably need to understand the invading force, right?
Definitely.
Because by the early 1890s, the Dalton Gang had established this genuine reign of terror across Kansas, Oklahoma, and California.
Oh, yeah. They were ruthless.
They weren't just specialists who quietly cracked safes in the dead of night. They were a brutal, all-around criminal syndicate. I mean, horse thieves, train robbers, bank robbers, and murderers.
They were basically the apex predators of the region at that time.
Exactly. And the core of this operation was built around three brothers. That's Grat, Bob, and Emmet Dalton. And they were supported by two accomplices, Bill Power and Dick Broadwell.
The psychology of those Dalton brothers is what makes them such a fascinating case study in criminal escalation, because the family wasn't some monolith of outlaw culture.
Right. It wasn't just a family business of crime.
Not at all. There was this stark dichotomy right in their own home. Their older brother, Franklin Dalton Frank, was actually a legendary lawman.
Wait, really? A lawman?
Yeah. He served as a highly respected deputy U.S. Marshal, and he actually died in the line of duty fighting bootleggers.
Oh, wow.
So Grat, Bob, and Emmett, they grew up seeing the absolute reality of law enforcement. They knew the tactics, they knew the risks, and they obviously saw the ultimate price their brother paid.
But they still went the other way.
Right. They deliberately chose to wage war against the very system that Frank died defending.
Which, honestly, that choice really underscores their motivation for hitting Coffeyville. Because they weren't just looking for a payday, They were driven by pure ego.
Oh, absolutely. The ego was massive.
Because they were actually cousins with the notorious Cole and Jim Younger, which connected them directly to the legacy of Frank and Jesse James.
Right. And the James Younger gang was like the gold standard of frontier outlaws.
Exactly. So the Daltons wanted to eclipse them entirely. They decided to pull off something no gang had ever successfully done, which was a simultaneous double bank robbery in broad daylight.
I mean, stepping out of the shadow of Jesse James required a huge spectacle.
Yeah.
So they wanted to hit the Condon Bank and the First National Bank at the exact same time. But to execute this massive flex, they chose Coffeyville, which is a town where they had previously lived.
Right. They grew up walking those exact streets, which I have to call out their strategic planning here. Choosing your own hometown for a raid is just a catastrophic failure of operational security.
Oh, without a doubt.
Like, if we view this through a military lens, anonymity is the armor of any raiding force. The moment you strike a target where the civilian populace actually knows your face, you completely surrender the element of surprise. It just seems like the ultimate tactical blunder.
It does. But look at it from a partisan raider's mindset. When you launch a quick strike offensive behind enemy lines, your biggest vulnerability isn't getting in, right? It's the extraction.
Right, getting out alive.
Exactly. So the Daltons calculated that their intimate knowledge of Coffeyville's alleyways, escape routes, and local terrain gave them an extraction advantage that basically outweighed the risk of recognition.
I see.
They assumed their disguises would buy them the critical 3 to 5 minutes needed to secure the cash, and then their geographical knowledge would guarantee their escape.
But they miscalculated.
Massively. They fatally miscalculated the town's reaction speed.
Yeah, and that miscalculation becomes glaringly obvious the second they cross the town line at 9 in the morning. So they ride in wearing these fake theatrical mustaches and beards.
Which is just ridiculous to think about.
It is, because in a close-knit 1890s frontier town, people don't just recognize your face. They recognize your silhouette, the way you ride. And specifically, they recognize your horses.
Oh, definitely. Horses were like cars back then. Everyone knew who drove what.
Exactly. So a local storekeeper named Alec McKenna looks out his window, sees right through the theatrical props, and instantly identifies the gang.
And McKenna's reaction is crucial here. He functions as a flawless early warning radar system.
Right. He doesn't scream or start shooting.
No, he doesn't panic at all.
Yeah.
He doesn't fire a wild shot that would alert the gang that they've been spotted. He just quietly steps out and begins alerting the town's leadership, specifically Town Marshal Charles Connolly. So the gang's assumed 3 minutes of surprise just evaporates before they even dismount. The town's command and control is activated while the Daltons are literally still tying up their horses.
That is incredible. And what happens next is just a staggering display of rapid logistical distribution. So word reaches Henry Isham, who is a local hardware merchant.
Right.
And Isham realizes a massive firefight is imminent. But instead of locking his doors and hiding in the back, he basically turns his civilian hardware store into a forward supply depot for a neighborhood militia.
He just opens the armory, essentially.
Literally. He starts pulling repeating rifles and shotguns down from the display racks, ripping open boxes of ammunition, and just handing them out to local citizens on the street.
The speed of this mobilization is it's difficult to comprehend until you factor in the demographics of an 1890s frontier town.
What do you mean?
Well, Isham didn't have to train anyone. You have to remember, many of the men he was handing rifles to were hardened veterans of the Civil War. Or they were men who hunted daily just for their own survival.
Oh, right. They already knew how to fight.
Exactly. They understood muzzle discipline, they understood how to load under pressure, and they inherently understood squad-level tactics. Isham simply provided the ordnance. The citizens instantly organized themselves into a coordinated defensive perimeter.
While the town is silently establishing this perimeter, the gang commits a fatal tactical error. They split their forces.
Never split the party.
Never. So Grat Dalton, Bill Powers, and Dick Broadwell head into the CM Condon Bank. And Bob and Emmet Dalton take the First National Bank across the plaza. They deliberately divide their firepower and basically step into two separate bottlenecks. Because inside the Condon Bank, Grat, Bill, and Dick draw their weapons and demand the vault be opened. But the teller looks at them and says the vault has a time delay lock. It literally cannot be opened for another 10 minutes.
Which was a massive deal back then. A time delay lock in 1892 was a relatively new, purely mechanical marvel designed specifically to thwart bank robberies.
Because there was no override.
No override. Once the timer was set, the internal mechanism physically disconnected the tumblers from the boltwork. So you could hold a gun to the teller's head, you could threaten to burn the building down to the ground, but that heavy steel door simply would not open until the clock wound down.
Man. So the teller's announcement just neutralizes the gang's momentum instantly.
Totally.
And the psychological agony of those 10 minutes must have been suffocating. Because in a raid, momentum and shock are your only advantages.
Right, you need speed.
Yeah. Imagine standing there in a dead silent bank, your adrenaline is spiking, watching the secondhand tick, and then peering through the glass windows, they start seeing armed men maneuvering in the streets outside.
Right. Oh, they had to know it was over.
Yeah, the citizens aren't fleeing. They are actively taking up fighting positions.
And the standoff finally shatters over at the First National Bank. Bob and Emmet's heist is interrupted by the citizens outside. The gunfire erupts, and that signals to the brothers trapped in the Condon Bank that the raid is a total failure.
At that point, the objective instantly shifts from stealing cash to sheer survival.
Exactly.
And this is where the citizens of Coffeyville demonstrate just brilliant use of urban terrain. Because They don't just stand in the street trading volleys like in a movie. They position themselves behind heavy wagons, in brick doorways, and crucially, they climb onto the roofs of the surrounding buildings.
Right, they secure the high ground.
Exactly. They create a devastating kill zone. The Daltons are subjected to plunging fire and enfilade fire the very moment they step out the doors.
And to visualize why this was so lethal, consider the angles, right? Plunging fire means the citizens on the roofs are shooting down from above.
Right.
So if you're a bank robber trying to hide behind a wooden horse trough or a wagon, that cover only protects you from horizontal fire. Firing from the rooftops completely negates whatever cover the gang thought they had.
It renders it useless.
Exactly. Furthermore, the citizens establish enfilade fire.
Which means they are firing down the long axis of the street. So if you imagine standing in a narrow hallway and someone is shooting straight down the middle of it from the far end, there is nowhere to step out of the way. The rounds are just sweeping the entire length of your escape route.
Yeah.
The hunters are now the hunted in a mathematically perfect crossfire.
It's incredible. And this transforms the event from a quick heist into a sprawling 15-minute urban gun battle.
15 minutes.
Yeah, and 15 minutes of sustained combat is an eternity.
I can't even imagine.
The sheer volume of black powder smoke would have choked the street, reducing visibility to just a few yards. And the deafening roar of dozens of large-caliber rifles firing simultaneously in an enclosed plaza, it creates total sensory overload.
So the gang realizes they're trapped, and they make this desperate, fighting retreat toward their horses.
Right, they try to break out.
But because the citizens have the streets locked down, the Daltons are funneled into a narrow laneway across from the Condon Bank. They are herded directly into the heaviest concentration of defensive fire.
Yeah, that narrow space quickly earns the name Death Alley.
Wow. Death Alley.
It was just a tactical slaughter. Grat Dalton, Bob Dalton, and Bill Powers are shot dead on the spot. They are just completely unable to break the perimeter.
And what about the other two?
Well, Dick Broadwell manages to mount his horse, even though he's mortally wounded. He rides out of the kill zone, but he ends up bleeding to death just a half-mile outside of town.
And Emmet.
Emmet Dalton, the youngest brother, he's shot multiple times. He takes a massive shotgun blast to the back, but miraculously survives his wounds.
Wait, he survived a shotgun blast to the back.
He did. He ultimately spends 15 years in prison before receiving a pardon.
That's wild. So the town achieved a complete tactical victory. They completely wiped out the apex predators of the frontier in 15 minutes.
They did, but we really have to look at the heavy price paid by the defenders.
Right, absolutely.
Because this was not a sanitized movie scene where the good guys dust off their hats and walk away unharmed. 4 local heroes died protecting their community that morning.
We should mention their names.
We definitely should. Lucian Baldwin, Charles Brown, George Cubine, and Town Marshal Charles Connolly.
Wow.
These were shoemakers, clerks, and dedicated civil servants who ran toward the gunfire to protect their neighbors. They paid the absolute ultimate price.
They really did.
And their sacrifice, it fundamentally shifts how students of history understand Wild West frontier justice. It wasn't about a lone savior with a badge. It was about ordinary citizens recognizing a threat to their community and executing a lethal, organized, collective defense. It was a shared, heavy responsibility.
Yeah. And the most incredible part for modern history tourists is that the physical scars of this battle are still visible today.
Yeah.
It completely bridges the gap between folklore and reality.
Oh, the preservation is amazing.
If you travel to Coffeyville right now, you can walk the exact ground where this 15-minute firefight happened.
The preservation efforts are truly remarkable. Like, while the First National Bank building is no longer there, the Condon Bank is beautifully preserved. You can walk right through the doors and stand exactly where Grat Dalton stood, staring at that vault, waiting for the time lock to tick down while the town armed itself outside.
That's chilling. And you can see Henry Isham's Hardware building too, right?
Yeah.
The actual forward supply depot, where the militia armed themselves in minutes. And the old town jail still stands. And right across the street from the Condon Bank, you'll find the Dalton Defenders Museum.
Which is a must visit.
Yeah, because this isn't just a collection of old photographs. They have preserved the actual physical artifacts of the battle. You can literally see the guns the outlaws used, their hats, and the saddles stripped from their horses.
And you know, the museum houses one specific detail that, to me, grounds the entire narrative in just chilling reality.
What's that?
The authentic feed bags the Daltons brought with them.
Oh, the bags for the money.
Exactly. They rode into town with these large canvas bags specifically to haul away the massive amount of cash they anticipated stealing. And looking at those empty bags, you really understand the sheer hubris of the gang. They walked in with absolute confidence, expecting to leave rich, and instead, they left in pine boxes.
Unbelievable. And stepping out of the museum, you can walk right over to Death Alley. It is paved now, but the city has actually painted CSI-style chalk outlines on the ground, marking the exact locations where Grat, Bob, and Bill fell.
Yeah, the spatial awareness you get there is incredible.
It is. Standing in that narrow alleyway, looking at those outlines, and then looking up at the surrounding rooftops, the spatial relationships we talked about suddenly make terrifying sense. You instantly understand why they couldn't escape. It's a textbook kill box. It honestly reminds me of walking the grounds of Gettysburg. You know, you can read about Pickett's charge in a book, but until you stand at the copse of trees and look across that wide open field, you can't truly grasp the scale of the conflict or the impossibility of the assault. Seeing the literal chalk outlines in Coffeyville does the exact same thing for frontier history.
It really forces you to confront the harsh tactical reality of the violence, which actually leaves us with an interesting question to consider about how we memorialize conflict in general.
How so?
Well, when we study traditional military battlefields, like Gettysburg, for instance, we often encounter these sweeping, manicured parks filled with grand bronze statues and polished marble monuments.
Right.
And those monuments, they often romanticize the heroism, but they kind of sanitize the violence.
Yeah.
But when a town preserves a raw physical space, like a narrow paved alleyway with painted outlines marking exactly where men were gunned down, it offers a very different historical experience.
It's much more visceral.
Exactly. Does the starkness of a chalk outline on the pavement tell a truer, more honest story about the brutality of conflict than a bronze monument ever could?
Man, that is a phenomenal thought to leave on. And if you want to explore the tactical realities of historical conflicts just like this one, we highly encourage you to dig into the foundational material that made this deep dive possible.
It's absolutely worth your time.
Head over to battlefieldtravels.com to read the deep research study by Mick Prichter on the Dalton Gang raid. You can view the actual GIS terrain analysis we discussed and explore hundreds of other fascinating battle and campaign studies. It's just an incredible resource for understanding the literal ground where history happened.